Hey, so I'm just going to talk quickly about sensory bins and how I'm going to be using them over the summer. Since we're going to be using sensory bins with the beginner and intermediate groups in art every week on Mondays. So I sometimes when I make a sensory bin, I use some whatever I have. I might have access to a bowl, a big bowl. This is my very favorite thing to use, this sort of a pan that you might use for cleaning dishes. They're also, they're available more like a longer, flatter kind. This is really great for playing with water in a sensory bin. It has a deep side and there's enough in the bottom that you can really move the material around. I'm going to demonstrate it in a glass bin just because I think it's easier to see on video. So here's the glass bin. And for definitely, the other thing I'm going to do this summer is I'm going to be focusing on one sensory material per week. That's kind of going to match with the week theme. So the first week is summer. So I think I'm going to do something like sand or salt. So it's kind of has that gritty texture like sand. There's a week for water. And so we'll use water in sensory bins. There's a week for for rainbow, right over the rainbow. So they might be using different colors. And every week you can decide what you want to put in the sensory bin. Maybe you want to keep it the same every week, which is totally fine. So if you want to use salt in the sensory bin, this is a very simple way. And with someone who, a student who might be at a more of a beginner level using something like this, the use of salt, just the act of pouring it can be part of the activity. And so getting used to the feeling of it on the hand and talking about the texture. So we might say that this is a gritty texture, and then we might feel the salt in the bin. You can add more. So it's just focusing on exploring the texture and exploring whether or not you want to feel it. So sometimes I like to demonstrate the feeling for the student and with my own hand and just show like, oh, I can make shapes. Look, I can make a squiggly shape. I can make a triangle. What shape should I make? I might ask the student, what shape should I make? Or shall I write your name? What's the first letter that I can write? And sort of presenting it as an invitation, especially someone who might be sensory avoidant. I like to present it as an invitation. I'm going to write a letter A. I'm going to write a letter A. How does A go again? And sort of practicing, oh, wait, what should I do? Do you want to show me? And then letting the student kind of be invited to touch it rather than necessarily like forcing the hand to touch it, because that can, it's just a more exciting, a more inviting way to try to engage. And some students will just want to get right into it, which is super too. So you could talk about different, okay, so maybe we're gonna practice sprinkling. Let it go out of your hand and sprinkle. And if your goal is to increase language, which a lot of students, we have that goal, talking a little bit while you do it and narrating what you're doing, also narrating what the student is doing is really helpful. You're letting it go out of your hand. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. Or sometimes I will use the student's talker and demonstrate you're letting it go out of your hand or putting it in. You just choosing one word to target the activity, and whenever that word is appropriate to use in this situation, I will just use that word. So next, sort of more, maybe you could call it an intermediate level activity, or maybe it's something you want to introduce because maybe the feeling of the salt isn't as appealing. You could add something, a different way of handling the salt. So I'm going to show that. So I might take, okay, so say I had my salt, I poured it in here. Oh, wait, you don't want to touch the salt, but maybe what you want to try, or maybe the student does love touching the salt and maybe you want to add color to it. This is a fun way to add color to salt. So I just have a piece of sidewalk chalk. And in the sidewalk chalk, with the sidewalk chalk, you can push really hard in the salt in a bowl and make the, so when you're pushing super hard, it's a process, it takes a little while. Push really hard and keep rubbing the salt around in the bottom of the bowl. You can do this back and forth motion. You can see it's starting to turn pale purple. So you really have to press hard. You can go back and forth like I'm doing, or you can make circles. See how now I've got the salt is starting to turn purple. So one thing you could do is divide up your salt and do different colors, right? And then you can pour this onto glue. It doesn't have to become something, but it's, if you wanted to take it to the next level, you can do that. Sometimes it's just fun to make, see how it turns color, how that can happen. Super fun. So you could add that back to the salt and mix it in a bin if you wanted, or you could glue it on something, draw with glue on paper and then sprinkle it. And then I'm going to show you one more suggestion. I think one of the things that I really like to focus on when we do sensory bins is just finding different applications. I love to use kitchen related materials because we probably have them already easily accessible, and they're really interesting a lot of times to kids. Kids kind of like to do what we do. So if we cook, they like to see that, you know, they can try those things. I happen to have a spice container that's empty, and the lid has these holes. So I thought that would be fun to try out. I rinsed it out. It's a little wet inside. So I could try putting salt in it, for example, and practice sprinkling. So this could be like, you know, after you've played, you know, for 30 minutes, one session just with the salt or just with coloring the salt, and then another time you want to introduce another thing that you can do with the salt, right? I like to save this and put it back in the bin the next time, especially if I'm working with the same students. So then you can have fun just trying out sprinkling. Like, what's it like to fill this up? Fill it up again, and then sprinkle again. Especially if you have a student who you really are focusing on working toward more in, initiating tasks themselves, and that kind of developing that kind of agency. Like if there's interest in this material, and then you can add something that they're also interested in, just let them come up with the creative application of the tool. So here's a cup. Maybe it's simple as picking up the cup, shaking it, and pouring it. These like a spoon, do the same. And if we're getting it out of the bin, a lot of times I just focus on trying to say, you know, redirect the attention to keep your hands in the bin. I have a whisk here, we could try that. All right, so you can imagine all of those things, and then, so you could imagine putting different materials. So another thing you could have is using water. So I would not do multiple materials in one session. I'm just showing it on this video so that you can get a sense of sensory bins overall. So for water, I poured water into this clear container so you can see it, and the student might just want to play with water. They might want to practice pouring the water and just watching it pour. You might want to see what kinds of things can float. This guy can float, and then this can sort of stand in there. And then if you don't mind having something that could stain your hands, you could use a little food coloring and add it in. And sometimes just one drop at a time is really interesting to watch. And you can see how that's pretty fun. You let it be there, or you can mix it. And so you're focusing a lot of times on, you know, playing, just sticking with the activity and playing and taking the interest to the next step, whether the next step would be, you know, pouring it again, or now pouring it on top, or pairing it with language. Or maybe it's just a time that the student is just totally in their own thought process and just working through what they're doing alone, and you're just observing. That's a really important time too. So that's the information I have for you for right now on sensory bins. I hope you'll join us some Mondays to check it out, and thanks very much.